Late 1944. The Pacific War is grinding toward its brutal conclusion. American forces are pushing back through the Philippine archipelago, island by island, street by street. Manila has been one of the most devastated cities in the entire war. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble. Hundreds of thousands of Filipino civilians have died. The city is a wound, and in the middle of that wound, something completely unexpected begins to happen. American soldiers and military chaplains start holding evangelical meetings. In tent chapels and bombed-out buildings among the rubble and the smell of gunpowder, they gather to worship. They call it the GI Gospel Hour. And the Filipinos around them, watching these foreign soldiers open their Bibles and sing and pray, start coming in. Out of a war that produced death on a massive scale, a mission was being born. This is the story of how a handful of American GIs with a burden for the Filipino people started something that would eventually send Filipino missionaries to the unreached corners of the earth. To understand what happened in Manila in late 1944 and 1945, you have to hold two realities at the same time. The first is devastation. The Battle of Manila, fought from February to March of 1945, was one of the most catastrophic urban battles of the entire Second World War. The Japanese Imperial Army, rather than withdraw from the city, chose to fortify it. What followed was a month of street by street, building by building combat that left Manila looking like Warsaw. Over 100,000 Filipino civilians died in the battle alone. Hospitals, churches, universities, and entire residential neighborhoods were destroyed. The Philippine people emerged from the war traumatized, displaced, and spiritually hungry. The second reality is spiritual openness. War has a way of stripping away everything that people normally hide behind. When your city has been bombed, when your family has survived an occupation, when the future is completely uncertain, the big questions of life and death and meaning come rushing to the surface. The Filipino people in 1944 and 1945 were asking those questions with desperate urgency. And into that moment walked men who had answers, not polished missionaries with carefully designed programs, just soldiers, young American men who had fought their way across the Pacific and found, in the middle of all that violence, that they could not stop thinking about the spiritual condition of the people around them. One of those men was Chaplain Hixon, who held some of the earliest GI Gospel Hour services in Manila. Around him gathered others, including military chaplains Leonard W. Hawley and Russell G. Honeywell, who would become central figures in everything that followed. Picture this. Manila, 1945. The liberation has just happened. American forces are consolidating control. And somewhere in the city, in a space that was once a mortuary, a group of soldiers and chaplains are holding an evangelical service. That detail matters. They were meeting in a mortuary, a place built for the dead. And they were preaching life. As attendance grew, the GI Gospel Hour outgrew the mortuary and moved to a new Christian service center, built by GIs in their spare time, using whatever materials they could find. This was not an official military program. This was soldiers on their own time, with their own hands, building a place where Filipinos and Americans could hear the gospel together. The ministry expanded quickly. Radio broadcasts went out across the city. Hospital visits reached the sick and the wounded. Bible classes were organized for Filipino civilians. Children's programs began, and a young GI named Philip Armstrong, who would later become the director of the entire mission, started making preliminary plans alongside other chaplains to establish a Bible institute for training Filipino pastors. The vision was not to create an American mission in the Philippines. From the beginning, the vision was to train Filipinos to reach Filipinos. When American troops arrived in Japan in the fall of 1945, the same thing began happening in Yokohama and Tokyo. GI Gospel Hour services sprang up in the rubble of Japanese cities. Different country, same burden, same fire. Then the war ended. Demobilization began. The soldiers went home. And as they returned to America, many of them carried something they could not leave behind. A deep, settled conviction that God had opened a door in the Far East, and that somebody had to walk back through it. They began to organize. New Year's Day, 1947, Denver, Colorado. While most of America was celebrating the New Year, a group of former GIs and military chaplains were meeting to do something far more serious. They were planning a mission. The men gathered that day included Leon W. Hawley, the former chief of chaplains for U.S. Armed Forces in the Pacific Theater, who became the first chairman of the board. Russell G. Honeywell was appointed chairman of the field in the Philippines. Leonard Sweet would chair the field in Japan. Philip Armstrong, who had helped lay the groundwork for the Bible Institute in Manila, was among the central figures in the new organization. The result of their deliberations was a formal mission agency, the Far Eastern Gospel Crusade, or FEGC. Their stated goal was clear and direct: to mobilize God's people to engage the unreached and establish reproducing indigenous churches, not American-dependent churches, reproducing indigenous ones, churches that could grow and multiply on their own without a foreign missionary holding everything together. That conviction, embedded in the founding DNA of FEGC, would prove to be one of the most important commitments the organization ever made. Within the same year, FEGC officially launched mission work in 2 countries simultaneously, the Philippines and Japan. The same 2 nations where the GI Gospel Hour had first taken root. The mission went back to where the soldiers had prayed. And in Manila, the Bible Institute that Philip Armstrong and his colleagues had only dreamed about during the war began to take shape. The late 1940s and early 1950s were years of rapid, deliberate construction, not just of programs, but of people. The Far Eastern Bible Institute and Seminary, which would come to be known by the acronym FEBIAS, was established in Manila to train Filipino pastors and church workers. This was the vision that Armstrong and others had sketched out in the middle of a war, and now it was becoming real. Filipino men and women were coming to FEBIAS, learning the scriptures, and going out to plant churches. FEBIAS is now known as FEBIAS College of Bible, located in Valenzuela City, and it has trained generations of Filipino church leaders across more than 7 decades. Alongside the Bible School, FEJC missionaries launched evangelistic campaigns across the Philippines. Bible studies were organized in homes and communities. Literature was written and distributed. Medical outreach reached rural and underserved communities that had rarely seen a doctor, let alone a missionary. Church planting spread outward from Manila into the provinces. FEGC started church planting missions in the Philippines after World War II, birthing several churches in Quezon Province, the Marinduque Islands, and the Cagayan Valley. These were not just outposts of a foreign mission. They were Filipino congregations, led by Filipino pastors, trained at FEBIAS, taking root in Filipino soil. The pattern that had been set at the GI Gospel Hour was holding. Reach people, train leaders, build churches, and then step back so the local church could carry its own weight. In the 1960s, FEGC missionaries moved into Taiwan, extending the mission's geographic reach beyond the Philippines and Japan for the first time. The Far East was opening further. As FEGC grew through the 1960s, it began connecting with other mission organizations that shared its convictions. In 1971, Central Alaskan Mission, with its multifaceted ministries in Alaska, merged with FEGC. Central Alaskan Mission had been founded in 1937 by a Moody Bible Institute graduate named Vincent James Joy, who had spent decades planting churches among the Atna people of Alaska's Copper River Valley, and had built Alaska Bible College and a radio station alongside his church planting work. The merger brought together ministries in Asia and the Arctic under one roof, a combination that would have seemed improbable on paper but made theological sense. The same God who burdened soldiers for Filipino souls also burdened a young man from New Jersey for indigenous Alaskan communities. The Philippines remained a central part of the merged organization's mission fields throughout the 1970s. Then, in 1981, the organization took a step that reflected how much it had grown since that mortuary in Manila. The name was changed to Send International, based on John 20:21. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. Far Eastern Gospel Crusade had begun as a mission to the Far East. Send International was a mission to everywhere. By the 1980s, Send missionaries had begun work in Spain and Hong Kong. By the 1990s, they had expanded into Central and Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, East Asia, and Central Asia. The GIs who met in a mortuary in Manila in 1945 could not have imagined it. Here is the part of this story that I want you to sit with for a moment, because it is extraordinary. The Philippines began this story as a mission field, a place where foreign missionaries came to bring the gospel, a country that needed to be reached, and for decades that was the posture. Americans and other Westerners coming in, training Filipinos, planting churches, doing the work. But something was shifting underneath the surface through the 1980s and 1990s. Filipino believers who had been trained at FEBIAS and other institutions were not just leading local churches, they were beginning to feel the pull of cross-cultural mission themselves. Filipino missionaries began going out through Send and other agencies carrying the gospel beyond their own shores. And in 2011, Send International made it official. The Philippine Sending Council, branded as Send Philippines, was formally created as Send's official sending office in the country. Read that again, a sending office, not a receiving office, not a mission field coordination center, a sending office. Send Philippines' mission is to mobilize, recruit, train, and send Filipino cross-cultural disciple makers to reach unreached peoples around the world. The Philippines is home to over 90,000 evangelical churches and more than 12 million believers, a vibrant and growing Christian movement. Send Philippines equips Filipino citizens and Filipino diaspora for cross-cultural ministry, with the goal to mobilize God's people and engage the unreached in order to establish reproducing churches. The country that received missionaries in 1945 is now sending them. The people who were reached are now reaching others. The mission field has become a mission force. In John 20:21, the risen Jesus says to his disciples, "As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." Those words became the name of this mission, and they capture the entire arc of this story perfectly. God sent American soldiers to the Philippines in the middle of a war. Those soldiers heard something they could not ignore. They went back. They trained Filipinos, they planted churches. And now, 8 decades later, Filipino disciples are being sent to the unreached corners of the earth, carrying the same gospel that found its way into a mortuary and liberated Manila in 1945. Sent and sending. That is what the Great Commission looks like when it takes root in a nation and grows the way God always intended it to grow. Not dependence, multiplication. The work that began in the rubble of war is not finished, it has only just found its full shape. If this video added something to your faith, your thinking, or your understanding of God's work, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps this content reach more believers who need to hear it. And if someone in your life needs to see this, share it. That means more than any algorithm ever could. This channel exists to take the Word of God and the story of His work. No fluff, just faithful, honest, biblically grounded content. We are glad you are here. Stay with us. God bless you.